The stars had never looked so crowded. 12 million warships hung in the darkness of space like angry fireflies, their hulls painted in the deep purple colors of the Dominion. Each ship carried weapons that could turn a small moon into dust. Each ship held warriors who had trained their entire lives for this moment. And at the center of this massive fleet sat the flagship, a vessel so large that it made planets look small. Grand Admiral stood on the bridge of this mighty ship, his 4 yellow eyes scanning the blue planet below. Earth, the of the humans, the place where his enemies had first crawled out of the mud and looked up at the stars. He had waited his entire life for this day. His father had waited. His grandfather had waited. In fact, his entire species had been waiting for exactly 6,000 years. Today, the waiting would end. Was an impressive figure, even by standards. He stood 8 feet tall, his body covered in scales that shifted between green and gold depending on his mood. Right now, they glowed a deep red, the color of righteous anger. His 4 arms were crossed behind his back in the traditional pose of a warrior about to deliver judgment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 6 of preparation. "Begin the transmission," he ordered. "Let the humans hear their doom." The message went out across every frequency that humans used. It interrupted television shows, radio broadcasts, and video calls. It appeared on phones and computers and the giant screens in city centers. Billions of humans stopped what they were doing and watched as the alien face appeared before them. "Humans of Earth and the colonies beyond," began, his voice deep and filled with ceremony. "I am Grand Admiral of the Dominion. For 6,000 of your years we have prepared for this moment. For 6,000 years we have remembered the insult your ancestors delivered to ours. For 6,000 years we have built our fleet, sharpened our weapons, and trained our warriors." He paused for dramatic effect. On the bridge around him, his officers stood at attention, their scales all glowing the same angry red. "You took from us what was rightfully ours. The asteroid fields of 442, the mining rights that belonged to your primitive ancestors tricked ours into accepting a settlement that robbed us of our destiny, but we are patient, we are determined, and now we are ready." Raised one of his 4 fists toward the camera. "Today the Dominion declares war upon humanity. Prepare your defenses. Say goodbye to your loved ones. Make peace with whatever gods you worship. For we are coming and we will not stop until justice has been served. You have 1 planetary rotation to respond. After that, the destruction begins." The transmission ended, allowed himself a small smile. The speech had taken him 30 years to write and perfect. Every word had been chosen with care. Every pause had been practiced thousands of times. It was, he believed, the greatest declaration of war in galactic history. On Earth, in a government building in the city of Seoul, Defense Minister Park sat at her desk eating lunch. She was a small woman with short gray hair and kind eyes that had seen many strange things in her 60 years of life. When the alien transmission interrupted her video call with her daughter, she put down her chopsticks and watched with mild curiosity. She watched the alien commander make his speech. She noted his impressive scales, his 4 arms, his yellow eyes burning with ancient anger. She listened to his words about insults and asteroids and 6,000 years of preparation. And when he finished with his dramatic threat of destruction, she did something that surprised even herself. She laughed. It started as a small chuckle, the kind that escapes when you remember something funny from long ago. But it grew. Soon she was laughing so hard that tears ran down her cheeks. Her assistant rushed in, worried that something was wrong, but just waved her hand and kept laughing. "Minister Park," the assistant asked nervously, "are you all right? Should I call the emergency council?" Wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. "Call them," she said, still smiling. "But tell them not to worry. This is going to be the most entertaining week we have had in years." The laughter spread. Within an hour, the recording of declaration was everywhere on human networks, but it was not shared with fear or panic. People were laughing. They were making jokes. They were creating funny pictures and videos. Someone set speech to cheerful music. Someone else made a cartoon of the alien commander as an angry child throwing a tantrum. In space, the sensor operators watched the human communications with growing confusion. They had expected terror. They had expected desperate military movements. They had expected surrender negotiations to begin immediately. Instead, they were watching humans laugh. Grand Admiral, one of the sensor officers said carefully, the humans appear to be amused. Turned slowly, amused. Yes, sir. Their entertainment networks are showing your declaration repeatedly, but the humans watching it are laughing. They are treating it as comedy. For the first time in his long military career, Grand Admiral did not know what to say. His scales flickered between colors as emotions he could not name washed over him. Confusion, doubt, and somewhere deep inside, a tiny seed of worry. Humans were strange creatures. Everyone in the galaxy knew this, but surely they understood the danger they were in. Surely they knew that 12 million warships could destroy their entire civilization in a matter of days. Surely they would stop laughing soon. They did not stop laughing. Fleet Commander was having a good day before the alert came. He sat in the recreation room of the battleship Persistence, holding a handful of cards and trying to decide if Lieutenant was bluffing. The young officer had a terrible poker face, but today something was different. Maybe he was finally learning. I raised 50 credits, said with a small smile. Studied him carefully. 40 years in the military had taught him many things, and one of them was that young officers always got too confident when they had good cards. He was about to call the bet when his communicator buzzed with an urgent message. Sir, the ship's computer announced, we have received a priority alert from Earth Command. An alien fleet has declared war on humanity. The card game stopped. Everyone looked at, waiting for his reaction. He picked up his tablet and read the message twice. Then he watched the alien commander's declaration. Then he read the message again. Is this a joke? He asked. The transmission appears to be genuine, sir, the computer replied. Turn 2, who was already pulling up information on his own tablet. The young lieutenant's eyes were wide, but not with fear. He looked like someone who had just discovered something very funny. Sir, said slowly, they are talking about the 442 incident. The what? The 442 incident from around 4000 BCE. That is 6,000 years ago. Blinked. He had been a military officer for 4 decades. He had studied human history extensively. He had never heard of any incident at 442. Look it up, he ordered. His fingers moved across his tablet. After a few minutes, he found what he was looking for in an ancient historical database that most people had forgotten existed. Here it is, sir. 6,000 years ago, when humans first developed basic space travel, we encountered a species called the 442 system. There was a small dispute over some asteroid mining rights. According to these records, our ancestors settled the matter peacefully by giving the 3 entire asteroid belts as a gift of friendship. A gift, repeated. Yes, sir. They seemed happy at the time. There is even a thank you message here from their leader. Silence filled the recreation room. Then someone started laughing. It was Chief Engineer Myra Song, a woman who rarely showed emotion. But now she was laughing so hard she had to hold onto the table for support. They spent 6,000 years, she gasped between laughs, preparing revenge for receiving a gift. The laughter spread through the room like a wave. Tried to maintain his composure as a commanding officer should, but even he could not keep a straight face. The situation was simply too absurd. Computer, he said, still smiling, what have humans been doing for the past 6,000 years? The computer took a moment to compile the information. In the past 6,000 years, humanity has experienced the following major events: 12 near-extinction events including asteroid impacts, plagues, and climate disasters, 3 separate world wars before space expansion, 6 civil wars after space expansion, the discovery, loss, and rediscovery of faster-than-light travel on 3 separate occasions, the colonization of 417 planets, the creation of 2 artificial, the merger of 3 separate human governments into the current United Terran Assembly, approximately 47,000 significant technological advances, and 1 universe-wide dance competition that lasted for 11 years. Everyone stared at the screen. "We forgot about them," said quietly. "We literally forgot they existed because so much happened." Nodded slowly. It made sense now. Humans did not hold grudges for 6,000 years because they were too busy surviving disasters, fighting each other, making peace, exploring the universe, and apparently holding decade-long dance competitions. Who had time to remember a minor dispute with an alien species over asteroid mining rights? "Computer," said, "compare the fleet's weapons to our current military technology." Analysis complete. The weapons systems are approximately equivalent to human technology from 700 years ago. Specifically, they match the weapons used during our Third Civil War. The laughter stopped. Now everyone looked shocked, but not because they were afraid. 700 years, Myra repeated. Their ultimate weapons are 700 years behind ours. That is correct. Their most advanced warship would be classified as a museum piece by current human standards. Leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. This was not going to be a war. This was going to be an embarrassment. 12 million alien warships had traveled across the galaxy for revenge, and they had brought weapons that humans had stopped using before anyone currently alive was born. "Contact Earth Command," he said finally. "Tell them we need to handle this carefully. These aliens have spent 6,000 years preparing for something that we forgot about in a decade. If we are not careful, this could get very sad very quickly." "Sad, sir?" asked. "Think about it, Lieutenant. They built their entire civilization around this moment. Generations have lived and died preparing for a war against us. Their children grew up hearing stories about the great battle to come. Their scientists worked their whole lives creating weapons they thought would destroy us. And now they are going to discover that it was all pointless, that we moved on before their great-grandparents were born." The room fell silent again, but this time the silence was thoughtful. "That is actually very sad," Myra admitted. Nodded. "So let us try not to hurt their feelings too badly. They have waited a long time for this. The least we can do is let them down gently." The United Terran Assembly Hall was the largest meeting room ever built by humans. It could hold 50,000 representatives from 400 planets, and today every seat was filled. Giant screens showed the alien fleet still waiting in space, their 12 million ships forming patterns that looked impressive but, as everyone now knew, were completely harmless. President Han walked to the central platform. He was a tall man with a gentle face and white hair that made him look older than his 90 years. In his long political career, he had handled many crises. He had negotiated peace treaties, survived assassination attempts, and once talked down an artificial intelligence that wanted to turn the moon into a giant sculpture of a cat. But this situation was new even for him. "Fellow humans," he began, and the hall fell silent. "By now, you have all seen the declaration of war. You have heard their demands for justice over an incident that happened 6,000 years ago. And like many of you, my first reaction was to laugh." A ripple of chuckles passed through the assembly. "But I want us to think about this more carefully. Imagine you are cleaning out your grandfather's attic. You find an old letter from someone threatening to fight your ancestor over a property line. You would probably laugh at that too, and that is essentially what is happening here. They have sent us a very old, very angry letter. The question is, how do we respond?" He paused and looked around the enormous room. We could ignore them. Our ships are so far beyond theirs that their entire fleet is no real threat. We could destroy them in hours if we wanted. But I do not think that is who we are. We are humans. We make mistakes, we fight, we sometimes do terrible things to each other, but we also learn, we grow, we forgive. And sometimes we help others do the same. In the military command center below the assembly hall, Defense Minister Park was having a different kind of meeting. Her officers kept submitting battle plans, but none of them were serious. "This one suggests we send only museum ships to fight them," she said, reading from her tablet. "So it would be fair." Captain, who had submitted that plan, tried to look innocent. "I thought it would be sporting, Minister. And this plan suggests we send them a fruit basket and a calendar, so they can see how dates work." Commander Myra Song, visiting from the Persistence, did not even try to hide her smile. "Communication is important in any conflict, Minister." Sighed, but she was smiling too. "Does anyone have a serious suggestion?" An older officer raised his hand. Admiral had served in the military for 60 years. He had white hair, wrinkled skin, and eyes that had seen many strange things. "Minister," he said slowly, "I think the best weapon we can send is information. They do not understand what happened. They think we insulted them 6,000 years ago. They do not know that we actually gave them a gift. They have been angry about a kindness." Nodded, "Go on." "We should send a diplomatic ship. One ship, no weapons, carrying a full historical record of what actually happened. Let them see the truth. Let them understand that this whole war is based on a mistake." "And if they attack the diplomatic ship?" Smiled sadly. "Then we will know they do not want peace, but I do not think they will. I have studied them for the past few days. They are not evil, they are just angry, and anger based on misunderstanding can be fixed with truth." The decision was made within hours. The diplomatic ship Olive Branch would travel to the fleet carrying Ambassador Lee and his team. They would bring historical records, archaeological evidence, and one other thing that Park had personally requested. "Make sure the accounting team calculates compound interest," she told her assistant. "Compound interest, Minister. On those asteroid belts we gave them 6,000 years ago. If we are going to have this conversation, we might as well have the complete picture." While the diplomatic mission was being prepared, humans across the galaxy continued to react to the alien threat in their own way. Some made jokes. Some made art. Someone wrote a song called 6,000 Years Too Late that became instantly popular. A group of students created a game where players had to guess which historical events they had missed while they were preparing for war. But not everyone was laughing. On many planets, people gathered to discuss what the situation meant for humanity. If another species could spend 6,000 years holding a grudge, what did that say about the galaxy they lived in? What other ancient anger might be waiting out there in the darkness between stars? In a small coffee shop in Seoul, an old woman named sat watching the news. She had lived through many things in her 112 years. She remembered the Fourth Civil War, the Great Plague of 2487, and the day humanity made first contact with friendly aliens. She had seen humans at their worst and their best. "What do you think will happen?" asked the young man serving her coffee. Smiled. "I think we will teach them something important." "What is that?" "That holding onto anger is like carrying a heavy stone everywhere you go. You think it gives you strength, but really it just makes you tired. Sooner or later, you have to put it down." She sipped her coffee and watched the alien ships on the screen. 12 million vessels, carrying the weight of 6,000 years of anger. She hoped they were ready to finally let it go. The Olive Branch launched the next morning. Grand Admiral had not slept in 3 days. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the single human ship approach his fleet of 12 million vessels. It made no sense. Nothing about the human response made any sense. They should have been terrified. They should have been sending their entire military to face him. They should have been begging for mercy or at least trying to negotiate from a position of strength. Instead, they had sent one small ship with no weapons and a crew of only 40 people. "It must be a trap," said Vice Admiral, his second in command. "Perhaps the ship carries some kind of weapon we cannot detect." Shook his head slowly. "Our sensors show nothing. No weapons, no explosives, no hidden technology, just communication equipment and historical databases." Historical databases. That is what they are transmitting. They say they want to share information with us. They say there has been a misunderstanding. Scales turned orange with confusion. What misunderstanding could there be? They stole from us. Everyone knows this. Our children learn it in school. Our priests speak of it in temples. The human betrayal is the foundation of our entire civilization. Said nothing, but somewhere deep inside him, a small voice wondered if perhaps that foundation was not as solid as he had always believed. The olive branch stopped at a respectful distance from the fleet. Ambassador Lee sent a simple message. "Grand Admiral, I request permission to board your ship and speak with you directly. I come unarmed and in peace. I believe I have information that will interest you greatly." Warrior codes were ancient and strict. A peaceful envoy who requested to speak could not be refused, had no choice but to accept, even though every instinct told him something was wrong. "Let him come," he ordered. Lee was not what expected. The human was small, barely reaching the middle of his chest. He had gray hair, a calm face, and eyes that seemed to hold no fear at all. He walked onto the bridge as if he were visiting a friend's home, not standing in the heart of an enemy fleet. "Grand Admiral," said with a small bow, "thank you for seeing me. I know this situation is confusing for you. I hope I can help clear things up." "There is nothing to clear up," replied stiffly. "Your ancestors stole from mine. We are here for justice." Nodded. "I understand that is what you believe. May I show you something?" Without waiting for permission, he placed a small device on a nearby console. A holographic display appeared, showing documents that were clearly very old. Recognized the style immediately. These were records, written in the ancient form of his language that no one used anymore. "This is the original agreement between our peoples," explained. 6,000 years ago, your ancestors and mine met near 442. There was indeed a dispute over asteroid mining rights, but look at how it was resolved." Read the document. His 4 eyes moved across the ancient words once, then twice, then a third time. With each reading, his scales grew paler. "This says, the humans gave us the asteroid belts," he whispered. "As a gift of friendship," confirmed. "Your ancestors were new to space travel. They needed resources. Our ancestors had plenty to spare, so they gave freely, asking nothing in return. But the stories," his voice was shaking now, "the histories, everything we were taught. Somewhere along the way, the story changed. Perhaps someone was embarrassed to admit they received charity. Perhaps someone wanted to create an enemy to unite your people. I do not know how it happened, but I know what the truth is." Pulled up another document. This one showed a message, also written in ancient script. "This is a thank you message from your ancestor to mine. He speaks of human generosity. He promises eternal friendship between our peoples." Stared at the message. He recognized the name at the bottom. It was one of the most revered figures in history, a leader so respected that children still sang songs about him. And here he was, thanking humans for their kindness. "There is one more thing," said carefully, "something that might be uncomfortable to discuss." "What?" asked. His voice was barely a whisper. "Those asteroid belts we gave your ancestors 6,000 years ago. They were quite valuable. Our accountants have calculated what they would be worth today if you consider compound interest and resource extraction over all that time." He showed a number. The Grand Admiral sat down heavily in his command chair. The number was enormous. It was larger than the combined wealth of several star systems. According to this calculation, they did not just owe humanity an apology. They owed humanity a debt so large it would take centuries to repay. "We came here for justice," said slowly, "and we are the ones who owe justice to you." Smiled gently. "We are not interested in payment, Grand Admiral. We never were. The gift was given freely and we do not want it back. All we want is peace. All we want is for this misunderstanding to end." Looked at the human ambassador for a long moment. Then he looked at his officers, who were standing in shocked silence, their scales flickering through colors that had no names. 6,000 years of anger, 6,000 years of preparation, 6,000 years of hatred for an enemy who had never been an enemy at all. "What do you want us to do?" asked finally. "Go home," said softly. "Tell your people the truth. It will be hard at first. Change always is. But I believe your people are strong enough to face reality, and when they are ready, we would like to be friends." For the first time in his life, Grand Admiral had no idea what to say. The withdrawal of the fleet was not immediate. For 3 days, Grand Admiral sat alone in his quarters, reading the historical documents that Ambassador Lee had given him. He read them again and again, searching for some proof that they were false, some evidence that the humans had created clever forgeries to trick him. He found nothing. The documents were real. The truth was undeniable. Everything he had believed his entire life was wrong. On the 4th day, called a meeting of all his senior officers. The gathering took place in the largest hall of the flagship, and thousands of commanders attended either in person or through holographic transmission. They waited in tense silence as their Grand Admiral walked to the speaking platform. "I have something to tell you," began. His voice was tired but steady. "Something that will change everything you think you know about our people." He showed them the documents. He explained what the ambassador had told him. He watched as the same journey he had taken over the past 3 days played out across thousands of faces. Confusion, denial, anger, and finally, slowly, acceptance. "We have built our civilization on a lie," said when he finished. "For 6,000 years, we have hated an enemy that never existed. We have prepared for a war that should never have happened. And now we must go home and tell our people the truth." The official announcement came 1 week later. The Dominion formally its declaration of war, citing diplomatic. It was a polite phrase that meant nothing, but everyone understood what had really happened. They had discovered that their entire reason for existing was based on a mistake. The reaction across space was complicated. Some refused to believe it. They called the documents fake and demanded that the war continue. Others fell into deep sadness, unable to accept that their lives had been dedicated to a lie. But many, especially the younger generation, felt something unexpected: relief. They had never really wanted to fight. They had simply believed they had no choice. 3 months after the withdrawal, Grand Admiral received an invitation from the human government. They wanted him to visit Earth. They wanted him to see for himself the people he had almost destroyed. At first, he refused. He was too ashamed. But Ambassador Lee sent him a personal message. "Shame is like anger," the ambassador wrote. "It feels heavy because it is. You can put it down whenever you choose." Accepted the invitation. Earth was nothing like he expected. In stories, humans were described as cunning monsters, always planning tricks and betrayals. But the humans he met were ordinary people living ordinary lives. They worked, they laughed, they loved their families, they worried about the future. They were not so different from after all. He visited museums and saw the long history of human civilization. He saw the wars they had fought against each other, the terrible weapons they had created, the mistakes they had made. But he also saw how they had recovered from each disaster, how they had rebuilt after each destruction, how they had always found a way to move forward. In one museum, he stood before an exhibit about human civil wars. The display showed images of terrible battles, cities in flames, millions dead. But it also showed what came after: peace treaties, reconstruction, former enemies becoming allies. Humans had done terrible things to each other, but they had also learned to forgive. "How?" asked the museum guide, a young woman named Min. "How do you let go of so much pain?" Thought about the question for a long moment. "I think it is because we have no choice," she said finally. "We live short lives compared to many species. If we spent all our time being angry about the past, we would have no time left for anything else. So we learn to let go, not because we forget, but because we want to live." On his last day on Earth, sat in a small coffee shop in Seoul with Ambassador Lee. Outside the window, humans of all different types walked past. Young and old, light-skinned and dark-skinned, natural and artificial. Some were actually aliens from friendly species who had chosen to make Earth their home. All of them walked together without fear or hatred. "I have a question," said, holding a cup of coffee that he had grown to enjoy during his visit. "Ask," replied. "In 6,000 years we thought about nothing but revenge. We built our entire society around hatred for you. Every child was taught to despise humans. Every scientist worked to create weapons to destroy you. Every moment of our existence was dedicated to this war." Paused. "What did you do in those 6,000 years?" Smiled. "We almost went extinct 12 times. We discovered faster-than-light travel, forgot how it worked, and discovered it again. We fought wars that killed billions of our own people, then made peace and became one civilization. We built intelligent machines that almost destroyed us, then became friends with them. We explored the galaxy, met other species, made allies and enemies and everything in between. We created art and music and stories. We fell in love and had children and grew old and died, and were remembered." He sipped his coffee. "We lived, Grand Admiral. That is what we did. We simply lived." Was quiet for a long time. Then he raised his cup. "To living," he said. "To moving forward," replied. 100 years later, the Dominion had become humanity's closest ally. Children learned the true history of their people, including the mistake that had almost led to a terrible war. They learned about the human ambassador who had come alone to face 12 million warships with nothing but the truth. They learned that holding onto anger was pointless, and that the galaxy was too big and too beautiful to waste time on hatred. And whenever Young asked about the great humiliation, their elders would tell them this: "We spent 6,000 years preparing for war. The humans spent 6,000 years preparing for everything else. That is why they laughed when we arrived, not because they thought we were weak, but because they had forgotten we existed. They had been too busy living to remember our anger." "And what did we learn?" the children would ask. "We learned that the strongest species in the galaxy is not the one with the biggest fleet or the most powerful weapons. It is the one that knows when to put down its burden and walk forward into the light." In a small coffee shop in Seoul, now converted into a museum of peace, a statue of 2 figures stood by the window. One was tall with 4 arms and scales. One was small with gray hair and kind eyes. They were holding coffee cups, raised in a toast to each other. The plaque beneath them read, "To letting go, to moving forward, to living." And above them, through the window, the stars continued to shine on a galaxy that had learned, once again, that understanding was stronger than anger, and that the best response to hatred was sometimes simply to laugh.